Hello, exclamation point. Blessed Foundryman, exclamation point. I was really enamored by last week's discussion of new ways to review GPUs that focuses on showing off games running at their best. That and the brief discussion on upgrades had me wishing for you to produce maybe a whole series of videos showing off just how good games can look and be made to run when using optimized settings and even driver-level tricks, like the one-click overclocking in the new NVIDIA app for low to mid-tier components we can actually find in stock at more reasonable prices. Also, for people looking for high-end components, I almost always find myself telling them to get a new display, since I find that a good HDR experience is worth at least 2 modern GPU generations of performance. Two separate points there, really, Alex. But yeah, I'm still going to talk about it as the anti-benchmark concept, and yeah, it would involve us basically looking at GPUs in the way we look at the consoles. Obviously we'd be in control of the features that would be used and not used, and the compromises that would need to be made instead of the developers. But we can use the developers' own optimization or settings choices to do the job there. And you can use features from NVIDIA and AMD to produce a bespoke experience. I was thinking that but obviously there is going to be limitations there. You're going to be limited to 2, maybe 3 GPUs. And I think possibly the logical solution there would be NVIDIA and its closest AMD equivalent, and then NVIDIA and maybe the last generation card, or rather the generation card that's the likely upgrade vector.
Right.
So it would be 5070 versus 9070, and it would be 5070 versus 3070, I guess. And it would
to like the previous, like the second, like skip a generation.
Yeah, I mean, it's very rare that people actually move on from one series to the next, right?
It is, yeah. I think that would be the way to do it, because you need to show like what would you get out of value if you were to upgrade to one of these 2 things. And that's basically what it would say. It's also a little bit reminiscent to 4K on a budget, I was just thinking, because you're trying to get the most out of a game. And like you would have I don't know, how would you select the games though exactly?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Because there are going to be some games where, they maybe don't have support for those features,
Yeah, so...
tricky. Yeah, there's a lot of thought that we need to put into that, but I do think there is some merit to the concept, because those features are just becoming more and more important. The problem is basically, what do you target? I mean, I would say, for 70 series products, let's say, since we're talking about 5070, you'd be talking about 1440p. You'd be talking about frame rates significantly in excess of 60 frames per second, but possibly not. Well, I guess multi-frame generation would make it happen, 165 FPS or whatever. Yeah, it's we need to put a bit more thought into it. But I'm curious about this concept of a new display being better than 2 modern GPU generations of performance. I can see the point, right? Because, those 4K 240 hertz monitors are pretty awesome, aren't they?
They're great.
They really
Oliver, though, seriously, I think, Oliver, you have like more of an affinity for screens than I do. Would you like agree with the sentiment that is the like equivalent of 2 GPU upgrades?
Well, I think it's like not really. It's you're comparing along different axes. It's apple and oranges to me, but like I do think that having a display that you really like, possibly a larger format display, or a display that can deliver really strong contrast ratios, good HDR experiences, and good brightness. Those are all things that I'm kind of looking for. I think that can greatly improve the experience of playing a game. And like, I would definitely say, I would definitely prefer, let's say, Alan Wake 2 on PS5 on a really, really good display that I liked a lot versus Alan Wake 2 with path tracing on a display that was kind of mediocre or poor quality. I think that's definitely the case. So I think having that ideal display for you matters a lot, and could possibly matter a lot more than each additional margin of performance. But I think there also is something as like a display that's good enough for your purposes, and perhaps like that, the margin between like a mid-range television that might be, let's say mini LED based, and the very highest end mini LED or OLED display might not make that much of a difference, right? It's about finding that a bit of that compromise point. But yeah, for sure, I would tend to agree actually that your choice in display can make definitely a bigger impact on your gameplay than some margin of a couple generations on your GPU.
Yeah, classic example of that from my perspective is if I go on vacation, what do I take? The Switch OLED. At one point, it was Switch OLED versus Steam Deck LCD, and I just took the Switch OLED. Right, and the screen was definitely a big part of that decision. Of course, things changed when the Steam Deck OLED came along. Now I'll take that because you're getting more performance and you're getting like a really awesome screen. So yeah, screen is definitely part of the graphics experience, no doubt about it. As to whether it can be quantified in terms of the amount of GPU generations, that's a bit trickier, I think.